Your go-to source for global shifts, Globe Lines, is back with another deep dive into events that could send shockwaves through the economy and energy landscape. Canada, long tied to the US in trade, is redrawing the map with tariffs, political tensions, and economic uncertainty brewing. Now, it's setting its sights across the Atlantic, exploring new trade partners in the European Union and the United Kingdom. But what does this mean for the auto industry, Tesla, and America's energy dominance? Stick around as we uncover the key forces driving Canada's pivot away from the US.
The second is about aluminum and steel. And meanwhile, we need to stand strong and send a clear message that Canadians will fight back. And that's what we'll do.
US tariffs disrupt Canada's trade. By early 2025, trade tensions between the US and Canada reached a boiling point. President Donald Trump hit Canadian imports with a 25% tariff, sparing only oil and energy, which still got slapped with a 10% levy. His administration framed it as a crackdown on border issues, but the economic shock was immediate. Canada didn't back down, firing back with its own 25% tariffs on American goods, setting the scene for a full-blown trade showdown. Just when things couldn't get worse, the US took it a step further, expanding the tariffs to steel and aluminum. Crushing Canada's metals industry, the tariff hike sent shockwaves through automakers already struggling with stretched supply chains. Manufacturing costs soared, raising fears of layoffs and price spikes on both sides of the border. Analysts at the Bank of Canada warned of an 8.5% drop in exports, a hit that could lead to job losses, weaker consumer spending, and a slowing economy. As businesses scrambled to adapt, some Canadian firms even eyed a move south to dodge the tariffs. For Canada, this was the breaking point. Diversification was no longer an option. It was a necessity.
Honestly, it's not fair for us to be supporting Canada. And if we don't support them, they don't subsist as a nation. Tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell cars into the United States. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell lumber or anything else into the United States.
CANZUK, a rising trade alliance. With US trade ties unraveling, Canada is fast-tracking talks on CANZUK, a potential trade pact linking Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. The deal promises smoother trade, easier migration, and tighter diplomatic bonds. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer have already reignited negotiations, eyeing CANZUK as a hedge against America's economic unpredictability. With common legal frameworks and economic ties, CANZUK has potential, but not without challenges. Vast distances, economic disparities, and differing immigration policies stand in the way. Supporters see it as a chance to boost Canada's global influence, while skeptics doubt its viability. One thing is certain: Canada is set on finding stable trade routes beyond the US. Deepening trade ties with the EU. Since the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CTA, took effect, Canada's trade with the EU has jumped 65%. With US tariffs piling up, Canada is leaning even harder into its European strategy. In 2024, Trade Minister Mary Ung met with EU officials in Brussels to lock in deeper ties, with talks centered on critical minerals, clean energy, and tech, key to both sides' net zero goals. But it's more than just trade. Canada and the EU are building a green alliance, pushing for low-carbon manufacturing and sustainable resource management. Canada's partnership with Horizon Europe and the EU's research programs gives its firms access to billions in innovation funding. By strengthening economic ties with the EU, Canada is future-proofing its economy and building a more diverse global trade network. Before we dive further, help us out by hitting that like and subscribe. It keeps Globe Lines rolling and reaching more viewers like you. Now, let's chart the course toward our next key shift. Post-Brexit, the UK's trade shift. Brexit reshaped global trade, but for Canada, it created new opportunities. The Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement, TCA, kept 98% of Canadian exports to the UK tariff-free after Brexit. But by 2024, tensions emerged. The UK hit pause on negotiations for a broader free trade agreement, FTA, citing disputes over agricultural imports, specifically Canada's hormone-treated beef and British dairy products. As a result, British car exports to Canada now face a 6.1% tariff on models with high EU-sourced components. Despite this setback, Canada and the UK are gearing up to restart trade talks in 2025. The UK's move to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, in late 2024 opens even more doors for trade. For Canada, the UK remains a key player in its post-US trade strategy, especially as it deepens connections within the broader Pacific Trade Network. Canada's energy market expansion. For decades, Canada has been the backbone of US energy supply, providing 60% of its crude oil imports. But with rising trade tensions and looming tariffs, Canada is shifting gears, looking beyond the US for energy exports. A major step in this transition is the LNG Canada project in Kitimat, British Columbia, where pipeline installations wrapped up in October 2023. Set to deliver its first liquefied natural gas, LNG shipment by mid-2025, the project is targeting Asian markets like Japan, which may turn to LNG if its renewable transition faces setbacks. Meanwhile, Alberta is ramping up natural gas production, with Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz highlighting Canada's shipping edge over U.S. competitors on the Gulf Coast. And then there's the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion, TMX, which went live in November 2024, opening the door for more Canadian oil exports to China. These moves cement Canada's position in global energy markets, making sure it's no longer tied down by U.S. trade policies.
That's what we're doing elsewhere in the world with our Indo-Pacific strategy, the CPTPP, and free trade agreements we've recently negotiated with Ecuador and Indonesia, among others. That's what we'll achieve here with the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement that has already increased trade between our countries by 66% over the past 9 years.
Crossing new borders. Where does Canada go from here? Canada is steering its own course in trade diversification. With Europe, the UK, and Asia welcoming stronger ties, the potential for new economic alliances is huge. But can Canada truly break away from the US? Or will geography and deep-rooted connections keep them linked? Could CANZUK and expanded energy exports lay the groundwork for a new economic powerhouse? We want to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Before you head out, don't forget to subscribe to Globelines, your go-to stop for all things geopolitics, global markets, and power shifts shaping our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.